Well, hello again and welcome back. We're so glad ourselves to be back with you after the July 4th break for this July 10th edition of the Clean Commercial Transportation Update. I'm Bill Van Amberg, and along with Alicia Gildy, my colleague as always, will be your hosts for today's webcast. We've really got a great lineup for you. Bonnie Trowbridge is back again at the controls for us, and we've got Whitley Porter and Casey Okazaki monitoring chat and questions so we can be responsive to you. We really want to thank everybody for the great response to questions that we sent out after our last edition. Your responses are really helpful to us. It's really helping us as we plan to make the CCTU, to call it in shorthand, more responsive and keep us more connected than ever, really, on news, trends, and tools for clean commercial transportation. A couple of things, some highlights that you shared with us. You really like the idea of the 30 minutes, so we will do our best in most cases to stick with that as closely as we can. And you told us that Zoom is the overwhelming platform that you prefer. Now, a number of people have said to us they do have some challenges with Zoom, but it was about 90%. So we're going to be using Zoom. But just so people know, in case you didn't, our webcasts are always available recorded on our website and on YouTube the following Monday after each one. So if you miss us or you want to spend more time, we'd love to have you do that. Please watch them in recorded form. You really like when we have some topical themes, although you also like it when we mix things up. You didn't give us much guidance there, but what you said was keep doing what you're doing, and so we will continue to do that. And you really want to focus on truck news, policy, funding, and also transit and technology on the top of your list. So we hear you. Let's walk through the update for today and take a closer look at some of the trends and issues that we're going to be looking to. And we've got transit as a theme today. So we'll do our industry news right off the top, but then we're going to be looking at a transit technology roadmap that our team has developed with the industry and with the federal government to really provide some guidance on where should we be putting additional dollars and focus. We'll look at transit impacts from COVID-19 and some new operating procedures that can actually help make transit safer, that many transit properties are recommending and providing out to the industry. We'll have a great interview with the head of the Sunline Transit Agency, Lauren Skyver. They're doing some fantastic things and continuing their leadership on hydrogen and other technologies. And of course, we'll look at some upcoming events. So that's what we've got. But I'll tell you, one thing that you told us also is you like the polls. So Alicia, I think we've got a poll right off the top.
We sure do. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Great to see all of you. So our poll, keeping with the theme of today, is what will be the biggest change you expect to see in transit in the next 5 years? First option here, are you expecting a significant adoption of zero-emission vehicles? How about a transition to smaller vehicles and dynamic demand responsive routes? Then thirdly here, introduction of automation and automated shuttles for harder to service routes. And then lastly, greater integration of ride sharing and ride hailing services. What do you think? We'll give you a few seconds here and then Bonnie will bring up the results.
You know, it's interesting, as usual, many of these things may go in parallel, but we really want to get a sense from people of where do they think the strongest trends are in this.
That's right. All right, Bonnie, let's see those results. All right, the first option seems to be the popular one here, significant adoption of zero-emission vehicles. Well, that's great. Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Bill, I'll turn it over to you for industry news.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Alicia. And let's really hit it, because what we are seeing and in timing with our theme of the day, we've got some interesting transit news from around the world going on with zero-emission transit. In Santiago, Chile, they have become actually one of the leaders in the Americas for going to full zero emissions in their transit fleet. They've just added 150 new BYD buses. That takes BYD up to 450 there. But they're aiming to get to 800 total electric buses. That'll be the most in the Americas by the end of 2020, and they plan to be 100% zero emission. We're also seeing some continued growth in the United States. BAE Systems is building about 435 hybrid electric bus powertrains. And this will be for New York City with 2 different bus makers, New Flyer and Nova. What's really interesting is they're building these in New York, and these will have these advanced systems that allow them to operate with zero emissions mode when they get to stops, and very efficient for their HVAC, their heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. among other accessory loads on the vehicle. Skipping to additional news, really interesting news in fuel cells. Hyundai has become really a powerful leader in fuel cells, not just in light duty, but into trucks. They delivered the first 10 of what will be 50 this year, and eventually 1,600 fuel cell trucks they're delivering to Switzerland. And it's part of a total ecosystem that they're building. It will have renewable hydrogen as part of that fueling system, and these trucks will be used in a very well-known route structure for logistics in Switzerland. Very exciting to see what's going on with this, not just in Asia and in Europe. This is something that we're starting to see in the United States as well. We're seeing that zero-emission technology move into other platforms. Volvo is actually taking their heavy-duty powertrain from the trucks they've already started to launch, and they're testing it in a fire truck. It says from Rosenbauer, and this fire engine is going to be used in Europe. Rosenbauer will do several of these. They'll be in Berlin, Amsterdam, and in Dubai. And interestingly, while it may or may not use a Volvo powertrain, Rosenbauer is actually going to be providing a zero-emission fire truck to Los Angeles sometime, we think, later this year or early next. So that technology moves forward, and it also moves into other segments. A company called Volta Trucks has announced Volta Zero. This will be used by one of the biggest postal and distribution companies in the Nordic states, Northern Europe. Bring and Posten is the name of the company that will be using it. Not only do they have the Norway Postal Service, but they also have operations throughout the Nordic states. So they'll be testing this vehicle with the opportunity to potentially take it much more broadly. And it's not just on road where we're seeing this. We continue to see these developments in the marine sector using zero emissions technology, either in hybrid form, or in this case, this is the world's first fully battery electric tug in operation. It's servicing the port of Istanbul. It's the Navtech Naval Technologies Z-Tug, or zero emission tug. Right now, it's actually showing some really not just dynamic reductions in climate change and other criteria emissions, but it's actually showing from its operations a better business case. So these are some of the really interesting news stories that we've had this first week that we've been back. And now, you know, as we really look at what's coming up next in the transit world, Alicia has some really interesting information that our project team is pulling together about how to keep that technology moving forward. Alicia?
Yes, that's right. And we have a great presentation given by CALSTART's Brian Lee, who's a program manager at CALSTART, who led the study looking at transit bus technology roadmap with recommendations on how to overcome important barriers. Bonnie, you want to share that video with us?
Hi, I'm Brian Lee, and I'm a project manager on the Zero Emission Bus team here at CALSTART. And today, I'd like to share with you our transit bus technology roadmap. This paper was a Federal Transit Administration funded piece of research that focuses on transit bus component technology. Now, one of the main challenges with transitioning to electrified buses is that many of the bus systems and components have experienced some technological challenges, and as a result, in order to improve the performance of these buses and to advance the industry as a whole, these challenges need to be overcome. So I'm going to do a quick rundown of the key findings and technologies that we discuss in our report. The first one is HVAC. So zero-emission buses do not have an internal combustion engine, and as a result, they cannot make use of waste heat to to provide heating for the bus. Instead, zero-emission buses have to generate their own heat through electric resistance heating. Now, this is extremely energy intensive, and in many cases will use more power than the actual drivetrain. So as a result, this has greatly reduced the range of the bus and depletes the battery, which reduces the performance. Now, in order to address this issue, buses can deploy heat pumps, which are equipment that transfer heat from the outside of the bus to the inside of the bus. Now, this uses up a lot less energy because it just transfers heat instead of generating it. And in most cases, this is a pretty effective solution. However, limitations arise when when these operate in extremely cold climates. If it's wintertime and it's negative 10 degrees outside, there's not a whole lot of heat that can be transferred to the bus, and as a result, this really represents a limitation for the technology. So this brings us to field-fired heaters. In extremely cold temperatures, heat pumps probably aren't going to be able to do the job. So instead, you can use a field fire heater, which will combust propane or natural gas to produce heat. The problem with this is that that these fuel-fired heaters produce emissions, and since they're not federally regulated, there's a risk that they could cause a disproportionately high amount of emissions. The reality of the situation, though, is in areas with cold climates that these will be needed for the near future. So as a result, we believe that the industry could benefit from research into emissions benchmarking to determine how much emissions these heaters produce, as well as a clean emissions protocol, which would be the development of standards to reduce and minimize the amount of emissions they produce. The next item is high-pressure hydrogen fueling. Right now, buses currently fuel at a lower pressure of 350 bar and can attain a decent range of 350 miles. However, a lot of transit agencies want to get an even greater range out of their buses, and in order to do this, they need to fit more hydrogen into the bus. One way to do this is through increasing the fueling pressure of the hydrogen, which means you can fit more hydrogen into the tanks and therefore get more range out of the bus. Industry has called for 700 bar fueling, and while this has been successfully implemented in light duty passenger vehicles, when you do this for heavy duty vehicles, it introduces a whole range of technological challenges that need to be addressed. So in order to overcome this issue, these challenges are going to need to be we're going to need to find solutions to these challenges. The next item is the use of automation in transit. Public transportation has to compete with ridership with rideshare companies and transportation networking companies. One way that public transportation can respond to this changing transportation landscape is by introducing automation and connectivity services in their vehicles, and this can be this can be incorporated in things like demand response and first and last mile services. We believe that that the implementations of this technology will allow transit agencies to compete with in this changing landscape. This, however, entails that they're going to have to develop level 4 automation, which is a big jump from where we're at from where automation technology is at right now. Lastly, microgrids and resiliency measures are important. Zero emission buses are ultimately powered by electricity, and if the electricity goes out, you can't charge or fuel your buses. So as a result, microgrids and on-site energy storage needs to be deployed to protect against this risk. And this is easier to do with smaller fleets, but when you end up with doing this for fleets that are larger fleets that have hundreds or possibly even thousands of buses, this becomes much more difficult. And as a result, we need to conduct more research into how to produce resiliency services for these larger fleets. Now that's my rundown for all the items in the report. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at blee@calstart.org.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. Brian couldn't join us live today because they've got actually a big transit team meeting going on. But here is the information on where you can find the transit bus technology roadmap. We've also, Casey's put that in the chat box. So please follow up on that and follow up with Brian. This is where we will be focusing a lot of our work and trying to steer some funding to actually help continue to develop transit improvements. The transit industry, though, is facing a whole nother issue than just technology right now, as we all know. It's how do we deal with what's going on with the COVID-19 situation? How do we make transit safe? And how do we respond to what users and riders are looking for in that world? Our transit team has really been working hard across the country in multiple sites to develop some of these answers, working with transit properties who are developing some standard operating practices or best practices to guide other agencies on what are some of the best approaches to safe operation dealing with COVID? Melissa Bartell, who is a project manager in our Midwest office, is joining us now. And Melissa, why don't you give us a briefing on what you found so far?
Thanks, Bill. As Bill said, my name is Melissa Bartell, and I'm a project manager in the Midwest office here in Troy, Michigan. I wanted to give a brief update on coping with COVID and our transit tools that we've been developing. The reason that we came up with these, as we're calling them, standard operating procedures to deal with during COVID, are that we want to be here to support our transit agencies. We know that you have a lot to deal with in many different ways, from reduced ridership and fare to making your passengers feel safe and your ridership feel safe. So we know that we wanted to provide instructions for you to provide safe operation, to instill confidence in your ridership. We know that while they may not see these standard operating procedures, they will know when something happens with COVID-19 that you have a plan and that you're going to complete the standards that they can feel confident you know where you're going. And as always, CALSTART is always here to support any necessities that come up with the COVID-19 pandemic. So we developed 5 standard operating procedures. Those standard operating procedures involve loading passengers that are exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19 and how to do that safely. It involves securing wheelchairs of COVID-19 passengers, as well as 2 standard operating procedures for denying service and how a supervisor can then pick up a passenger separately to keep those passengers safe. Next slide. So as you can see, this is the format of our standard operating procedures. It's detailed, but a quick read. It's clean and easy for you to use and available on our Clean Transit website. As we said, there are 5 of these standard operating procedures, and if there are any questions regarding those, you can always contact us. This is where they are available. They're available to everyone to download immediately.
Great. I think this is a really good asset. And first of all, Melissa, I would ask, we developed this, I think, through work out of the Midwest office in the San Joaquin Valley and elsewhere. Are we looking at developing some additional SOPs as they become available, or does this look like this covers the waterfront for now?
I think there are always new avenues that need to be gone down, and we've started with these because these are immediate needs as you're loading passengers, as you're encountering those passengers. But as we go, if there are suggestions or things that come up with transit agencies, that's what we do well. We listen to what our transit agencies need, and we react to how we can help them.
It looked like a pretty standardized design in terms of how I've seen transit agencies actually distribute things out into their operations. But can these be edited by transit agencies as they download them and customize to their kind of unique environment and work situation?
Absolutely. As we said, those are available on our website, our Clean Transit website, and those are customizable. They're in a Word format and able for you to download and use them as you see fit. We know that every organization has their own structure of how they call 911 or how they call their supervisor, and those may need to be updated for your specific organization.
All right, Melissa, thanks a lot. It's great. So the information is in the chat box here on the side. Melissa gave you the information, and we'll post that on our website as well. Thank you for joining us, and we'll just continue to watch that, Melissa. Good work out of the Midwest.
Thank you, Bill.
Well, look, we've got a lot of good work there, but I think one of the things we always love doing is talking to innovators who are on the leading edge of not only how you operate a transit district, but the technologies you use. And I think, Alicia, we've got one of those leaders coming up next.
Yes, we are certainly lucky. We have quite an impressive transit agency joining us today, and a great leader who's been championing clean transportation for quite some time. Sunline Transit Agency was one of the first fleets to go completely CNG, and now is deploying zero-emission buses with a combination of battery electric as well as fuel cell technologies, along with a pretty impressive investment in refueling infrastructure for hydrogen. So we're pleased to bring in Lauren Skyver from Sunline Transit Agency, who is the CEO and General Manager. Lauren, welcome. So wonderful to have you. And my first question would be, so why did Sunline choose to invest in fuel cell bus technology and refueling infrastructure. What are the benefits for hydrogen for transit application?
Well, I think for Sunline, one of the first key elements is just the range needed in our service area. We have 1,120 square miles of the Coachella Valley to serve with only 80 buses now. And at the time I got to the agency, we only had 67. So long routes with a challenging terrain and a challenging climate was one of the key principles for us to choose fuel cell electric vehicles versus battery electric in our deployments.
So one of the things that I think has been so impressive about what Sunline has done from the time it was in natural gas and now moving into this new gaseous fuel is your real investment in an ecosystem for refueling. Do you view this as something that can be a template that can be replicated elsewhere and other transit districts could adopt in their regions?
I do. I think that there are challenges, and I think being a producer and a station owner has a challenge, but it also has a security. It also builds internal knowledge of both the bus and fueling systems. I think one of Sunline's biggest strengths is we have internal employees who understand the fuel cell process, the hydrogen molecule to a PhD level, which helps us in both the deployments, operation, and maintaining of those fleets. I think sometimes when we remove ourselves from the fueling process, when we remove ourselves from the science behind what we're using, it can be more challenging to actually operate and maintain those vehicles and keep the life cycle moving forward. A key focus on understanding the technology internally not only is fun to do, and you're going to find people within your agency who love it, who love this part of the business, it also is successful in these deployments and in the long-term success of your zero-emission bus projects.
I do like, if I can just ask one additional question, one of the things that you have as a vision going forward is that you will not only fuel your buses, you'll be able to fuel additional fuel cell and battery electric vehicles coming through your region or in your region. Just to share that with us a little bit. That's a great vision.
I think that what we want to enthusiastically talk to transit about is that there are opportunities to sell your commodity and your excess fuel or energy produced. And we've been doing that with CNG for 20 years and make over $2 million a year on our CNG sales. We plan to do that with electrical, renewable electricity, so green electricity and green hydrogen through a microgrid project that we've begun. We'll first put a solar farm with 4 megawatts of power to run our hydrogen electrolyzer and store. At the 4th generation of this project, we'll actually have a truck plaza where zero-emission trucks going along the I-10 corridor could stop at our facility, either buy clean renewable hydrogen or electricity as they go into the LA basin and the port facilities that are along that corridor.
Well, that's really great. And I've been so impressed with the leadership, and not only that, your West Coast Center of Excellence, how you're promoting engagement with other transit agencies and sharing best practices and providing guidance on how to evaluate the best option for a transit bus. And I think with your experience across all these fuels is quite impressive and incredible. What are your next steps in terms of partnerships you're looking to forge? With you being a first of a kind fleet in the state, looking at heavy duty application for fuel cell technology, what's next in your mind?
Well, I think that the training component absolutely is something that's needed for transit. We have to find a way to both incentivize new employees into transit with this scientific element that we're doing. We are all technology companies that run transit. And so incentivizing those to look at transit as a career is important, but taking our current staff that may be working in a diesel or straight CNG environment and giving them the knowledge they need to operate and maintain these vehicles is very important. And so we want to make partnerships with other transit agencies about what their needs are, because they say if you've seen one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency. And so we're all different and our needs are all different. And so approaching this from a one-stop-all kind of approach will not work. And we need to get more specific about what each transit agency needs in both training and support in the development of their zero-emission program. It's not going away with COVID-19. You see that CARB has not reversed its position on the ICT rule and has just now passed the ACT rule. I think transit should get more familiar about what's happening on that front as well, since on a fueling infrastructure and the ability to potentially sell fuel, that could be a benefit for transit. So stay attuned to what's happening in California from both aspects, because you will see that they transcend both from transit to other heavy duty fleet operators.
That's great. Thank you, Lauren, and thanks for being a leader, and thanks for supporting workforce development. That's been a critical barrier, and now that you're part of that solution and moving forward some really important partnerships and education opportunities, I think that's incredible. Now, turning the conversation toward the impact of COVID-19, curious to how that has impacted Sunline's operations, and how might you be doing some things differently right now?
Well, I think we're all impacted. I mean, both personally and professionally, and transit's no different. We've been deeply impacted, but I want to bring a message of optimism. Under any circumstances, transit needs to stay optimistic about what it can do to change itself. We've been needing a reason to change the way we do business for a long time, and we've known it. We knew that with the inception of TNCs, that we had to become different in order to keep bringing to the public what they want to buy and ride. And so I think that if we keep that as our focus, Sunline is going to totally redesign its network. It had planned to do that over the next 3 years. We're going to accelerate that and do it over the next 12 months. COVID-19 has given us the opportunity to actually put these service changes in that we thought would take us a long time to do. But since we've been running Sunday service for so long, we can actually turn the light on this new service projection right away. And so I think that all of us leaders, whether we lead people, we lead an organization, or we lead a specific part of the business, need to stay optimistic and be looking forward to, if we were king and queen of the universe, what we change about our organization, and start driving those changes now. We can recover from this, we will. Transit always recovers and is always there for the public to provide rides and mobility, and this will be no different after COVID-19.
That's great. Lauren, you've been so instrumental and such a leader, and you empower us all. Thank you so much. Bill, any further wrap-ups before we close this segment?
No, I know we're always pressed for time, but I would just say, Lauren, I think some of the leadership that I most appreciate is that you're always looking for ways to expand the fare box, bring in new revenue, and support what you can do in transit, and thinking outside the box. I think that's the real message to transit as much as the technology.
Great. We all need to be entrepreneurs, and we're sometimes not incentivized to do so. But remember, that entrepreneurial spirit is what can make your agency change and your subsidy picture change as well. So keep that in your mind about how you can create a subsidy chain that is just your own creation and not necessarily from the federal or state funders that we expect our revenue from.
Put it in your control, not others. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Wonderful to have you join us today. Always appreciate your partnership.
Thank you. I just want to say, if anybody wants to reach out for information about our West Coast Center of Excellence or anything in our Zero Emission program, please don't hesitate, and I'll put my contact information forward in the chat box.
Oh, that's perfect. Great. Well, Bill, I believe we have an important webinar that kind of keeps in theme with how we're looking forward to improve transit and innovative mobility. Our very own Ryan Schuster with CALSTART is hosting a webinar on Monday, July 13th from 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time, focused on COVID-19 market opportunities and challenges for transit and mobility. Make sure, everyone, you check that webinar out. I think it's going to be quite impressive. You can see we have a wonderful lineup of speakers, so we hope to see you on Monday for this webinar. And then I think, Bonnie, before we wrap up with Bill, I think we have one last poll here.
Yes, we do.
And yeah, excited. I always love our polls. All right, so how do you see COVID, remote work, and other concerns changing transit in the future? So our options here: small drop in ridership, same business model, or significant drop in ridership, but maybe strong business model changes. Third here, transit grows with a blend of fixed and dynamic routing and integration of private services. And then lastly, transit value increases. Remote workers have an important need for transit versus using their own personal vehicle. All right, we'll give it a few minutes here for you all to respond to this question. I think this is a really good, important question, and really just hearing from Lauren, Bill, and all the innovative thinking of why it's so important that we continue to take advantage of our transit solutions. They're so important for how we move people, and really being mindful and careful of how we can protect our public health while making sure that we're getting folks to work and where they need to go.
Yeah, and really building off of what Lauren said is we can't control our destiny.
That's right.
Well, interesting, huh?
Wow, okay, so it looks like we're expecting for a 58% response here, significant drop in ridership with some strong business model challenges. All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for responding to our poll question. Bill, I'll turn it over to you for wrapping up our segment for today.
Yes, thank you. And I just got a note from Melissa Bartel on our team that we will have for transit properties who would like to take part a virtual tour of the New Flyer Vehicle Innovation Center. That's coming up on August 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can reach out to Melissa to get more details on that if you're a transit operator. But sadly, once again, our time is up for this edition of the Clean Commercial Transportation Update. But really, we want to thank everybody for joining us and staying with us. Remember, if you joined late or you want to review information on your own time, a recording of this webcast is available. We post it by Monday every week and also available on YouTube, so you can watch at your own pace. Next week, we actually have a very special edition that we're excited about, building on the Advanced Clean Truck Rule that has been enacted in California that requires a percentage of zero-emission trucks to start reaching the market by 2024. We'll look at the impact that is having nationally, where fleet rules are headed in California, and also the growing international interest in driving fully zero-emission commercial vehicles. But until then, for Alicia Gildy and our full Clean Commercial Transportation team, I'm Bill Van Amberg. Thanks for sharing the time with us today. Please, with all that's going on with COVID, continue to be safe and stay healthy, and we will all work to stay more connected than ever in these very difficult times. Goodbye until next week.